Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geezerology. Bob and I are going to talk today about the Doors' third album, Waiting for the Sun. We've covered the Doors' first two albums, the debut and Strange Days. If you go look on our YouTube channel, you'll find those videos there. Those are the first two videos we've done. Today, we decided to go ahead and get back to the Doors, and we'll eventually, over time, get to the rest of their discography. But today it's Waiting for the Sun. This is the Doors' third album. It was released uh, on July 3rd of 1968. It was recorded from January to May that year. That was 5 months there. That means they spent a lot of time in the studio on this thing. And the reason for that being that this is really the first album that the Doors recorded that they didn't already have existing material. I mean, this album was, everything here was created during their studio time. This is the first album they did that was created specifically to be an album. And so it took a long time. It took about 5 months, and Paul Rothschild, the producer, got a pretty bad reputation for being a slow worker and a perfectionist. And Morrison especially, and the rest of the Doors, were none too happy that this took so long. And as we'll get into when we talk about the next album, Soft Parade, it was even a longer task. So this was entering a not happy period for the Doors. This is the only Doors album that reached #1 on the Billboard album charts, surprisingly enough to both Bob and I when we discovered that. We thought maybe the debut did, but no, the debut got to #2. This one hit #1. It's the only Doors album that hit #1. Hello, I Love You was the second single released from this album. That was their second #1 single after Light My Fire. The other single released from this album was The Unknown Soldier, and that hit number 38, I believe. I have it here, number 39. It was released in March. It hit number 39. Both these singles were released ahead of the album. So, and then once the album came out, no more singles from it. Anyway, that's the historical information on Waiting for the Sun. I'm going to ask Bob where he puts this in context with the rest of the Doors catalog. Bob, did you like it? Did not like it? Was it is it an essential album? Where does it fit in the Doors catalog now that we can look back and put everything in perspective?
Okay, well, first off, it's a Doors album, so it is essential.
I was thinking the same thing. All the Doors albums are essential.
Yeah. Exactly. So even when they were not that great, they were still better than a lot of what was being put out elsewhere. It's not my favorite album. If I had to rank them from their 6 studio albums, this one would probably be at the bottom. It's good, but it's just not as great as some of their other material. Robbie Krieger described this as the dreaded third album. You know, their first 2 albums, they're using material that they've already developed. Now they've become big stars. They're doing concert tours all the time, and they have to write this thing in the studio. And I think it really shows. You know, you're talking about 11 songs that go 33 minutes. So it's a short album. In contrast, their first album had 11 songs, but went for 42 minutes. So big difference in style. There are some standout tracks here. Hello, I Love You is a good tune. 5 to 1, Unknown Soldier, and Not to Touch the Earth. So that does have some good numbers. Got a lot of variety in styles. I mean, we're talking about flamenco music, some straight piano stuff, even some a cappella. It's a little too much toward ballads to really suit my taste. And I'm going to rate this based on something that you said about Strange Days when we talked about it. And you talked about Strange Days, how the song When the Music's Over, you just couldn't really get with the studio version when you compared it to what's on Absolutely Live. I have the same feeling about this album. Not to Touch the Earth and 5-1 on the Absolutely Live album, they rained fire down from the heavens. And here it just doesn't have quite the same punch. It's going to be kind of difficult to put into words, but I listen to the music and I keep sitting there going, okay, guys, let's put the pedal down a little farther. And they're just not quite there on it. So it's a good effort. It's not their best. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I largely agree with you there. I think, excuse me, my thing fell out there. Yeah, it's like I was saying, this is now the Doors pretty much creating everything on spec. You know, I mean, they have to come up with all these ideas and get them down to get this record out instead of just pulling on old material that they've already worked out. They've been playing, you know, they've been playing for a couple of years and everything. This isn't the case. Everything here is new to them. Hello, I Love You and Summer's Almost Gone actually were leftovers from the early Morrison songbooks. Everything else was pretty much created for this record. Yeah, Hello, I Love You. I used to think I was okay. You know, that was a nice little bouncy little single pop song. But when I started listening to this album again about a month ago, just to start writing about the Doors again, all of a sudden, "Hello, I Love You" just jumped out at me as it's just a kick-ass rock and roll song. It's like all of a sudden I fell in love for the first time in 50 years. I fell in love with that song. The other tune on here that my estimation it really went high in my estimation when I started listening to this album again was Not to Touch the Earth. Again on the live album, that's in the middle of the 14-minute or 15-minute Celebration of the Lizard, which is largely poetry reading by Morrison, with this like put in the middle of it. And I was just saying, well, this is just kind of a bad version of that. But then I started listening to it again, and I think it probably helped that I've been listening to the remastered edition. We talked about this before when you listen to the remastered. I think it was Loaded when we talked about Loaded. Mm-hmm. You said that you listen to remastered edition. It really made the music pop. That happened to me with Not to Touch the Earth. All of a sudden, I was listening to this song, and you know what? That's a really nice song that's stuck in the middle of this album. Everything else, I never have liked The Unknown Soldier. I still don't like The Unknown Soldier. I just think it's dumb. 5-1, I agree with you there. And on to 5-1, I don't like what they do with Morrison's voice on that. It's like it's some sort of distortion, some loud distortion on his voice, and it just doesn't work for me. The rest of the album is okay. There's some good things there. Sometimes they sound good when you listen to it. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it just depends on what mood you're in. Summer's Almost Gone, Wintertime Love, My Wild Love, which is an a cappella. And I just read this morning that the reason that My Wild Love was a cappella is because they kept trying to get down an instrumental track and they just weren't happy with any of them. So they just said,
really?
hell, let's just do this a cappella, and they did hand claps for the rhythm track. Wintertime Love, Spanish Caravan. I like Spanish Caravan. I like the flamenco guitar in it. This is it's an okay album. Like I say, it's a Doors studio album, so it's an essential Doors album. I don't rank it at the bottom. I ranked on my rankings. I had this Strange Days at the bottom. Just simply, I talked about that. I have this. I actually have this number 4. I have 2 albums below this in my rankings. the other one we'll talk about the next time we talk about the Doors. Um, it's all right. A couple other things. I did learn that the River Knows is Krieger's only song on this album. Robbie Krieger usually wrote 2 or 3 or 4 songs per an album. He only did one on this one. This was Yes, the River Knows. And also, Hello, I Love You. Did you know this? That in the UK, whenever the song is played in the UK on radio or whatever, Ray Davies gets the royalties for that.
Yes,
Because he won a court. He won
Yeah.
a court. He won a lawsuit in the United Kingdom that they ruled that it was plagiarized from All Day and All of the Night. The riff in there.
Which I don't get that connection, but I guess it's there. I don't hear it.
I can hear it if I want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? It's not like Stairway to Heaven and that earlier song that came through. To me, they sound exactly the same, but they didn't win that lawsuit. But anyway, I'm not a judge, so I can't really say. Yeah, there's not a whole lot more to say about this. It's okay. They're experimenting. They're experimenting. This is the first time they're doing it this way, and I think it was the product. It was largely successful, but it just wasn't. It wasn't outstanding, and it wasn't. It just wasn't one of their better efforts, and I think largely because they hadn't done things like this before, and this is the first time they're doing it, and they were just learning. And as we'll find out later, as we go through these albums, that they tried to expand on this studio experimentation on the Soft Parade, and that didn't work either, and that was pretty much the end of that. Then they went back to being a live band again for their last 2 albums.
I think also you're starting to see here the disintegration of Morrison. The recording of this album was supposedly a nightmare. His drinking really gotten out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're seeing him here starting to lose his muse. And I think that affected the musicians. The Doors, they brought these different elements there, Krieger started out as a flamenco classical guitarist. He had the jazz drumming of Densmore and, Ray Manzarek's classical influences. And Morrison, I think, was their driving force to be more dark and more forceful. And 5 to 1, the story that I read, Morrison Densmore's doing his 15-minute meditation thing. He comes back and Morrison says, I want a rock drum beat. And Densmore's like, well, no, man, I want to do some jazz stuff. No, give me a straightforward rock. So he starts doing some straightforward drumming. The other guys pick up on it. And then Morrison starts doing 5 to 1. So I think the musicians needed Morrison. Without him, I think they drifted off to their jazz and stuff like that. So I think that's showing up on this album. Mm-hmm. That Morrison.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Because you do hear this on some of the post-Morrison albums. You hear them coming back to some of these things that they did here,
right?
With the more jazz and then
I think if you look at their subsequent albums after this, I think Morrison is getting back on track somewhat. And I don't know how relevant this is, but I was just noting this morning that the first album runs, like I say, 42 minutes. The last album runs 49 minutes. Everything in between was in the low 30s or so.
What was this one?
This one was 33 minutes exactly for 11 songs. So we're talking a lot of very short songs here.
Yeah.
And the very last album they did, ran 49 minutes. It was the longest album they did. So it seems like, the first album, they kicked the door open. And then the last album they did, you could almost be very metaphysical and say, gee, did they know that was going to be the last thing they were going to do? You know, so they put everything into it. So I think you see start out fantastic, dip some, and then finish up back on top.
Right.
Yeah.
I think maybe I think that can be simply explained that like I mentioned during the Strange Days discussion, they were just a much better live album than they were a live album. They were a much better live band, because they recorded the debut and the last two albums pretty much live in the studio. I mean, a little overdubbing here and there, but they were basically just the band in the studio playing the songs. Where starting with Strange Days here, and then especially on the Soft Parade, they were trying to be a studio band, and they weren't a very good studio band. Have anything else for Waiting for the Sun?
Pardon?
Anything else about Waiting for the Sun?
I don't know.
We pretty much covered it. We pretty much covered it without going into the details of each of the tracks, which I don't think is really all that helpful here.
Yeah. I hate this phrase, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Correct.
It's not a bad album.
It is a Doors album, so it must be heard.
Yes, exactly.
But then after you heard this one, then go check out the other ones.
Right.
Okay, Bob. Geezerology.com. What's our blog? What are you working on? Do you have anything coming up for that?
Yeah, I do. I just put the finishing touches this morning on my piece of my reaction to actually listening to the Velvet Underground's Loaded for the first time in its 50-year history. So I got that ready to put up. I got a couple of other things done, and then I've got 2 or 3 other pieces in the works that I will get done as life permits.
Okay, yeah, I'm juggling a couple things around. There are a couple of bands I want to write about. I'm looking right now. At some point, I want to write my first piece on Tom Waits, and I feel that might be coming up fairly soon.
Again, what took you so long?
And also started working on this morning on a piece on a guy named Robin Hitchcock, who's still around, but he was one of the early indie artists who he's taken several forms. He started with a band called the Soft Boys, and he's played with 2 or 3 different bands that he's put together. He's always been the front man. I used to listen to him back late 80s, early 90s. Lost track of him recently, but I want to go ahead and get caught up and see what he's up to. Okay, everybody, well, thanks for listening. Bob and I are going to tackle the Humble Pie live album next week. Performance, what's the title? Performance Live
Rockin' the Fillmore.
Rockin' the Fillmore.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to tackle that next week. Bob has thrown me a challenge. He wants me to listen to it. I've never listened to any Humble Pie. I've always known of them. I've never listened to them. Bob threw me a challenge to listen to this album, and he wants to turn the tables on me for what I did with him for Loaded. So we'll see how that turns out. I will give you a little hint that I have listened to it once through already. I want to listen to it 2 or 3 times over the next few days, and then we'll talk about it next week.
All right. Look forward to hearing what you got to say.
Bob, have a good Sunday.
You too, Scotty. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.